What you're watching is video taken in the early hours of Juneteenth of 2020. It shows the moment protesters brought down the statue of Confederate General Albert Pike.
Now the National Park Service says it'll be restoring and reinstalling that monument. Joining us now over Zoom, the Hill's congressional reporter Brett Samuels. Morning, Brett, and tell us about this decision.
Yeah, good morning, guys. This is something that obviously, as we saw in that footage, this is an issue that sort of dates back to 2020 when there was this big uproar over Confederate statues of Confederate figures, and protesters trying to take those down. President Trump at the time was rather upset about this, rather outraged about this. And President Trump and Republicans have long argued that even statues of Confederate figures or controversial American figures should be kept up because it's, this whole picture of American history. And now the National Park Service says they'll be restoring this Albert Pike statue. We should note he was also an important figure in the Freemason movement. And that's, again, something that defenders point to. But, I think this is sort of a sign of how President Trump and Republicans are kind of reshaping the discussion around this and reshaping the discussion as well around Washington, D.C. with some of the orders that we've seen the president issue in his second term so far.
We know the National Park Service cites a desire to, quote, beautify the nation's capital in the decision. Beautify is a word, to your point, that President Trump has mentioned when he talks about taking over the district. Is that sort of the cloud hanging over this, the president's real desire to have his fingerprints on the future of D.C.?
Yeah, I definitely think that's part of it. I think, there's this broader idea of, we've seen the president issue orders about, a statue garden of important Americans. We've seen him sort of wade into the culture wars on these things and really aggressively push back on, any efforts to sort of, erase, as some people might say, signs of Confederate generals or important Confederate figures, while one side argues that, these are statues that are honoring racist figures or figures who are seceding from the Union. We've seen the White House kind of go the opposite direction, say there should be this full picture of American history. For example, renaming Fort Bragg after it had been stripped of that name by the Biden administration as a Confederate general. But, when it comes to the district, we've seen the president argue that the district needs to be cleaned up. He's pointed to, the homeless population in the district and has repeatedly sort of threatened this idea of taking over D.C. We have seen the mayor, Muriel Bowser, try to forge sort of a stronger relationship with the president, I think, to kind of address some of those concerns. But as you said, this is sort of the cloud, I think, that hangs over some of the actions like this.
So for people who were supportive of taking down these statues, they believe that Confederate generals were traitors and that they don't deserve to have statues in their honor any longer. But to your point, the president believes it's part of the full history. He wants to have this restored. I guess the question is, why didn't he do it in his first term, Brett?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. That's sort of the question, I think, with a lot of the actions this president takes in his second term is why didn't he do it in his first term if he felt so strongly about it? In this case, I think it's something where, particularly when it comes to these statues, as we saw, that was in the summer of 2020. It was during the coronavirus pandemic. It was sort of when Trump was running for re-election. So maybe timing was just kind of a factor there where he wasn't able or wasn't interested in prioritizing that, putting these statues back up. But now, we've seen the president kind of go full speed ahead in fighting these culture wars, in trying to reshape the discussion around these things. And clearly he feels strongly enough about it to put this statue back up, or certainly with the support of the National Park Service, put this statue back up.
Brett Samuels. Brett, thank you for
Thanks,
joining
Brett.
us this morning. Of course, you can catch all of Brett's reporting at thehill.com.